and factions in Cuba opposing his methods. But he retained his great popularity with most Cubans.
Hi, my name is John Cabot, and I will show you why our hotel La Habana is the best. Welcome to Cuba. We have 5-star rooms with a lot of space for you to relax and a lot of privacy. We have the best sports services like football. We also have basketball and volleyball. Wow, look at our swimming pool.
We have fast food, sushi, and a big restaurant where you can eat anything you want.
Imagine having all of this just for you and your family. And the best of all is that this was made with Cuban resources. God bless America.
Naughty Cuba. After taking away Spain from Cuba, United States took complete control of it. Thanks to this, the United States took Cuba as a touristic center in which they started building their hotels and casinos. So the United States were also in charge of their economy. Americans went to Cuba to live the American dreamt life, like we have explained before. Only the richest people were able to go to Cuba and live there because it was really expensive. Everything seemed so perfect like this. But what about the Cubans? Well, Cubans didn't live the life of the Americans. Instead, they were exploited all along with their resources and land. The main resource that Cuba had back then was the sugar cane, which they worked all day and they received almost nothing in exchange. And the Americans, well, they stayed with basically everything. Dictator Fulgencio Batista didn't try to solve these problems. He was actually controlled by the United States government and did whatever they wanted. And America continued enjoying their touristic life. But then, young lawyer and Dr. Fidel Castro knew he had to do something for his country. So he became part of the armed rebellion. And soon he became the leader. So people in Cuba started protesting, and the guerrilleros were still fighting for their country. Fulgencio Batista had to come up with a new idea to control people. So his decision was to make elections for a new president in Cuba. Thanks to this, people started making their own parties, and Fulgencio Batista was almost sure that he would win, because he had practically no competition. But Fidel Castro, who led the Orthodox Army, started getting a lot of support from Cuban people, until he became a threat for the dictator. One of the main factors that gave Fidel Castro so much popularity was his ability for giving speeches, like Hitler on World War II. Due to the dangerous Fidel Castro, Fulgencio Batista decided to give a coup d'etat and to cancel the elections. So Fidel Castro realizes that the only way to take Batista away from the power must be with an armed rebellion. So the first step was to attack the Moncada barracks to get weapons and to weaken the government somehow. The plan was really well elaborated and simple, but a series of unfortunate events led to the total defeat of Fidel Castro and his little army. This attack led to the famous and brutal Fulgencio's rule of killing 20 innocent people per each of his soldiers killed on the battle. 8 soldiers were killed that day. One way or another, this attack increased people's support to the revolution all around Cuba. So we could take it as the cause for the expansion of the revolution. Fidel Castro was able to escape, but he was eventually captured and taken to jail, where he wrote his book, La Historia me absolverá, which was also the famous phrase that he said during his trial.
I say that history will absolve me.
His book talked about totalitarianism and the government in Cuba, based on Martí's ideas. Due to both foreign and Cuban pressure, Batista looks obliged to free Castro out of jail, just a few months after his capture. Then, Castro traveled to Mexico to be safe while he planned what to do. There, he met Camilo Cienfuegos, who had been already part of the protests in Cuba and had been in the United States writing the newspaper La Voz de Cuba, which was against the government in Cuba. There, he also met the revolutionary and helper of all Latin America, Che Guevara. Both of them had studied a career, knew how to fight, were great tacticians, and wanted to help Cuba. Anyways, these three men still had to return to Cuba and fight, so they gathered a small group of 82 people, and so the 82 men got in a yacht with a capacity of only 20 people and traveled to Cuba. The yacht stopped working before they arrived to the coast of Cuba, so they had to swim and leave almost all of their packages in the boat. But that was not it, because some days after arriving to the coast, they were ambushed by the army of Fulgencio Batista. Only 20 men, including Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, Camilo Cienfuegos, and Raúl Castro, were able to escape, and they stayed in Sierra Maestra. What they didn't know was that there were already little revolutionary groups all over Cuba fighting for their liberty. So the only thing that Fidel had to do was to spread Camilo and Che Guevara to different parts of Cuba so that they could take the Havana. So after realizing that he was already defeated, Fulgencio Batista decided to escape Cuba with $100 million. Fidel Castro leaves Torticos Torrado, who is loyal to him, in the power. But in 1976, Fidel Castro officially takes power in Cuba and decides to make a communist government. Many new schools and hospitals started to be built in Cuba. This improved the quality of life in Cuba. And as they were a communist country, people received food, electricity, home, and many other services from the part of the government. Also, another type of music was born. For example, Silvio Rodriguez started making music about the revolution because he was born in 1946 and all his childhood was full of fights and war from revolution. The government also started giving a lot of support for sports. That is why there have been many Cuban sports stars all around the world through time, such as the boxer Teófilo Stevenson and the baseballer Martín Dihigo, and there have been many other stars in many other disciplines. Unfortunately, many of these players could not get really far because of racism from other countries, but recent ones like Regla Torres have been able to progress in their discipline. One way or another, many of these sports stars saw their sport as a way to get away from Cuba because they didn't like the regime of Fidel Castro. As an interesting fact, in this photo, Che Guevara is looking at many dead people as a cause of a battle of Cuban revolution. Its name is El Guerrillero Heroico, and according to many experts, it is one of the 10 best photos of all time. It was taken by Alberto Corda, such as many of the images used in this video. because he was kind of the official photographer during the Cuban Revolution.